Abba Yahweh is saying in the construct of the minds of the people, things are horrible. They're devastating. He says the chaos and the confusion is masking their minds. But he says, my spirit is rising up in the earth. He says new changes. He says dynamic shifts. Korobo sende bekito korobo sutunda yaraba seteki robo sutunda bayana masata kayo robo sutu. He says irredeemable patterns are changing. Korobo sanda bakete karabaku sutu kutu robo sende bekita basanda bakata rababa korobo sutu. He says the process of changing in time robo kutu sutunda bayana masata is occurring in its existence. Karabababanda yana masata. He says at the core, he says immaculate shiftings, he says choreographies, he says manipulations in the realms of the spirit. He says as my spirit goes forth. He says with massive explosions, he says he says he curves the walls of destruction. Karabakatanda beketi kurubu sende bekita basete karababa kotu rubu sende bekita rabakatanda bakotu kurubu soto. He says my spirit is watching and waiting. Karabakate sete kurubu sutu. Patiently he says. He says, for the manifestation of my will and my power, he says, to effect the earth in magnificent eras. Karabakotu sutu, kendebekito bosutu, korobosanda bayana masata. He says depictions, korobosutunda bayana masata. Karabakutu sutunda bayana masate ki kurubusutu. Kurubusutu. He said depictions will be broadcasted. Rebekitu sutunda bakate kitsu sutu. Kandabayana masata kabayana masete. He says to encourage that which is about to take forth in the earth. Kurubusutunda bekita bakatu sutu kutsu. Kerebekitu sutsuku robusete. Kerebekitu sutunda bayana masate. He says strange things are occurring. Kurobusutunde bekita baka. Kurobusutu kutu kurobusende bekianda bayana masata. Kurobusutu. But he says the prospects of the times. Kurobusanda bakete. Kurobusutunda bayana masata. He says the prospect of the times will eventually affect the eras that they were meant to affect. He said effective immediately. He says, I'm turning matters, I'm changing matters. He says that will affect the will of the people. He says irredeemable things have happened. But he says the prospect of my grace will manifest a turnaround. He says a prospective change in the times, in the seasons, he says. He says everything will be according to my plan. He says the judgments will be executed. He says the judgments will be delivered appropriately. He says it's inevitable. He says it's inevitable as I awaken the people. He says they are waiting to see what I am about to do. And they have purposed in their hearts to take over the world. He says it won't happen. He says I'm perfecting my will. He says irretractable measures are being appropriated. He says the government systems are shifting. He says placements are being made and strategically shifted. He says the appropriate thing will be done. He says I am the reigning king. He says, what does man have to do with my agenda? He says, I am the one who calls the shots. He says, I will make things happen in my timing. He says, I will rescue my children. He says, I am walking the earth. Sifting the wheat from the tare. And making sure that the enemies are at bay. He says those wolves in sheep's clothing will be grounded. At the base, he says. Breaking away from the forces that have elevated them. He says, where have they measured times, and the span of time? He says, certainly not with my measurements. He says they've inappropriately done many things and marking many territories. making shifts that were very treacherous. But he says it's all coming to a halt. He says, I'm bringing them down. He says, I'm delivering my people. We thank you, Abba Yahweh. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your word, and we ask, Father, that it will not go fall upon deaf ears, but it will accomplish that which you've set out for it to do. All right, children. Oh boy, Daddy had a lot to say. Daddy had a lot to say about what's going on in the world, in the earth, and what he's about to do with his children, right? But we praise him and we thank him and we love him for everything. You know, he's a great God and a good God. Today's topic is